بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت الحكيم العليم. اللهم انشر علينا رحمتك وأنزل علينا حكمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. Alhamdulillah, بنعمته تتم الصالحات. By Allah's grace and His rahmah, we are at the very last session before entering into the blessed month of Ramadan. Right? So, as the Prophet ﷺ said, "Atakum shahrun azimun mubarak," a blessed month has come before you. And then the Prophet ﷺ mentioned how tuftahu fihi abwabul jannah, that the doors of Jannah are open in this glorious month. And وَتُغْلَقُ فِيهِ أَبْوَابُ الْجَحِيمِ, the doors of the hellfire are caused to be shut close. وَتَغُلُّ فِيهِ مَرَدَةُ الشَّيَاطِينِ, and all of the devils are restrained in this month. وَفِيهِ لَيْلَةٌ خَيْرٌ مِّنْ أَلْفِ شَهْرٍ, and in it is a month which is better than 1,000 months. مَنْ حُرِمَ خَيْرَهَا فَقَدْ حُرِمَ, whoever is deprived of the benefits of this month is most surely depraved person, someone who's deprived of great benefit. And the fact that we're here at the doorstep of the month of Ramadan and we are attentive to our physical condition, our religious condition, our spiritual condition, and working on the disease of the heart, we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes us from among the righteous, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not deprive the one who is seeking Him, right? And this is a kind of a summation of a lot of what we're talking about in this class on Wednesdays. And it really is a nice segue into the 25th hikmah. And that's why I think this hikmah especially is especially relevant for the month of Ramadan. This is on page 24. ما توقف مطلب أنت طالبه بربك ولا تيسر مطلب أنت طالبه بنفسك. So there's 2 and 2, right? Otherwise, the two sentences are exactly identical. ما توقف, and then تيسر, and then ربك, and then نفسك. ما توقف مطلب أنت طالبه بربك ولا تيسر مطلب أنت طالبه بنفسك. Nothing you ask Him will be withheld, but that which you ask only through yourself will be. So this hikmah, it teaches us that a goal which you seek by your Lord will not be held back, will not be difficult. And a goal which you seek by yourself will never be easy. This is actually one of the most famous hikam out of all of the aphorisms contained in this book. There are a lot of different translations. The one that you'll probably see very often is that anything which you seek with your Lord is easy, and anything that you seek on your own is difficult. This is also another possible translation, but the translation that Dr. Tariq has provided is more accurate than the popular translation that you will find on the internet and on different images. And what this shows us is that nothing you ask for in need will be delayed, right? ما توقف, right? We'll talk in a moment about توقف. It means something which is delayed or something which is postponed, something which is stopped. If you ask for it, أنت طالبه بربك. If you ask for it through your Lord. And nothing you ask for in need will come easily if you do it binafsik, right? If you do it for yourself. So if we want to give this summary of today's entire discussion, it is about pursuing goals by Allah. What does that mean? Because we're familiar, as Muslims, we're very familiar with the concept of doing it for Allah, right? I mean, this is the whole religion, is about worshiping for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our worship, inna salati wa nusuki, my prayer and my livelihood, wa mahyaya, and my life, wa mamati, and my dying, lillahi rabbil alameen. It is all lillah. It is all for Allah. Rabbil Alameen, the Lord of the universe. So as a Muslim, every Muslim, in fact, every Jew and every Christian, anyone who believes in God, understands the concept of doing it for God, for God. But today's discussion is not about that. Today's discussion is about pursuing goals by Allah, by God. This is what we're going to talk about today. And what we have to do is we have to first broaden our horizons. That today's discussion is not about religious matters only. It is anything which you seek, any permissible goal. It could be a dunyawi goal, or it could be an ukhrawi goal. It could be something worldly, or it could be something pertaining to the afterlife. But there are higher aspirations, himma, ulya. There's a higher aspiration and there is a low aspiration. And in religious matters, there's a high aspiration and there's also low aspirations. You could be asking for something very simple, right? Or you could be asking for something very lofty. In a worldly sense, it could be similar. You might be asking for something very menial, or you might be asking for something very grand. And what we know about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, as the Prophet ﷺ said in a good hadith, that Inna Allah yuhibbu ma'ali al-umur. Inna Allah yuhibbu ma'ali al-umur. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves lofty matters. You know, sometimes people, they start talking and discussing nonsense and they get really caught up on the smallest detail that doesn't make any difference. We're all guilty of doing that from time to time. When we become very nitpicky, this is an attribute that Allah does not love. You know, when people get really very petty, that's the word I'm looking for. When a person becomes very petty, it's just a matter of, getting obsessed with that small detail because you want to be in control of the matter, but not actually because of the substance, right? This is not what Allah loves. Inna Allah yuhibbu ma'ali al-umur. He loves lofty matters, important matters. Wa yakrahu safsaha. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah hates menial things, petty matters that people become super occupied with. So there are darajat, there are degrees of importance. It's not only in ukhrawi matters, it's not only in dini matters that things are of various importance. In worldly matters also. And this is why there are all these self-help talks. There are many YouTubers and influencers. There are many motivational speakers who talk about how highly successful people focus on a bigger picture. They don't get caught in small matters. And to aim high is from the Sunnah and the example of the Prophet ﷺ. What section of Jannah did the Prophet ﷺ say? That if you're going to ask Allah for Al-Jannah, ask for Firdaus. Ask for Al-Firdaus. We know that when we make dua, we should not say, oh Allah, if it's written that I shouldn't go to the hellfire, please think about not punishing me in the hellfire. Should we make dua like that? Insha'Allah. Did you know that you shouldn't say Insha'Allah in your dua? A lot of Muslims don't do that, don't know that. You cannot add any qualification in your dua, even the word Insha'Allah. The word Insha'Allah is for something that you are doing. وَلَا تَقُولَنَّ لِشَيْءٍ إِنِّي فَاعِلٌ ذَلِكَ غَدًا. As in Surah Al-Kahf, do not say about any matter that I am going to do this tomorrow. So the word Insha'Allah, that phrase, is for when you talk about your actions, your agency, because that is qualified by Allah's qada and His qadar, by Allah's divine decree and His predestiny. But when we talk about Allah's matter, there's nothing to qualify. So Allah, adkhilni al-jannah, enter me into al-jannah. And we say it even in the form of a command. Why? Because the person who is in dire need of someone crawls to a king. You know, he doesn't need really flowery language. He just says, please, free me, right? So this is the same way we go to Allah. Ajirna minan nar. Save us from the hellfire. So it's heartfelt when you make dua in that way. And similarly, when we ask for Al-Jannah, the Prophet said, ask for Al-Firdaus. Ask for the higher highest levels of Al-Jannah. Let's take a deep look, inshallah, and then we'll go to the conclusions. So as we look into the meaning, the first word that shows up is tawaqqafa. Tawaqqafa means something which is difficult, something which is delayed. So nothing will be withheld, right? Which you ask through your Lord, ma tawaqqafa. So it's a matter which is difficult, this is a matter which is delayed. And then the opposite word is wala tayassara, which means tasahhala, right? So nothing will be made easy, to make facilitated, right? Something to happen without any resistance. And in both sentences, the word matlab is mentioned. Now, the word matlab here, it has a different meaning in Urdu. So for the Urdu speakers, don't get confused. In Arabic, the word talaba means to seek something or desire something, although there's a common thread in all of the languages, right? So the thing which is your matlab, that is your maqsad. Your maqsad is your destination. Your matlab is your goal, your aim, your objective, your desire. That's something which you're seeking, and it's also, by implication, it's something that you want, right? And then anta talibuhu. Talibuhu is something, again, the same word is used, that you are seeking and you're desiring. It shows that you're actively trying to obtain that thing, right? And so there's a recognition here that as human beings, it's part of our nature to want things. This is a common thread. Whenever we've been going through this discussion and we talk about accepting the future, living in the moment, we talked about our intentions. I've been repeating again and again how having this real spirituality is not about divorcing yourself or detaching yourself from reality. It's not a form of escapism. The reality is that we are in this dunya and we live in this world, and we cannot detest the place that Allah has placed us in, because we are exactly in the place that Allah wants us to be in, right? So if we have preferences, if we have desires, the desires themselves are not intrinsically evil. Because somebody will say, well, I have this love for wealth, or I have this love for beauty, so on and so forth, that I have certain shahawat, right? I have certain desires, and they might think that I could be punished for that, or that makes me, or they might judge themselves that I'm weak for having that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His divine wisdom, He has made that part of our nature. It's the mastery of the nafs, that you do not allow those shahawat to dictate your actions. And your acceptance of events, that is the spirituality that we're trying to gain. And so there's a place and a time of the seeking. The word matlab in very classical Arabic was used as the place where treasure is hidden, where it is placed and where it is sought. Anything that's a prize, anything that's special. If you think about like Looney Tunes or old cartoons, whenever there's pirates and they have treasure, what do? They say, how do you know on the treasure map where the treasure is? X marks the spot. So that X, that is your matlab. That is the spot that you're seeking. That's what you're looking for. That's where the treasure is. So this is the meaning of this hikmah. And it leads us to the central question, which is that, are you seeking? So we established seeking itself and wanting something is not bad. So don't judge yourself for wanting something. That's not the issue. The question is, are you seeking something by Allah or by yourself? Because even if you're seeking something for yourself and it's not for Allah, Allah will give you tawfiq. Allah will facilitate it. Allah will make it easy, even though it's not for His sake, because you are seeking it through Him. Everybody with me? Because you're trying to obtain it. It might be like, oh, I want something worldly, or I want this career opportunity, I want this educational opportunity to open up. But because you are seeking Allah's assistance in making it happen, Allah will bless that effort and make it possible. Ibn Ajiba, he said that our tasarrufat, our worldly affairs, our interaction should be billahi. They should be by Allah, walillahi, and for the sake of Allah, wa min Allah, and from Allah, wa ilallah, and towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is maqam as-sidq. This is when a person truly attains the position of sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يَوْمَ يَسْأَلُ الصَّادِقِينَ عَنْ صِدْقِهِمْ, right? And not be nafsik. If you can truly say that it is for Allah and through Allah and from Allah, right? If you can say all of those things, then that is when it becomes sincere and it's not for yourself. Our nature is to say that others had affairs facilitated. So we look in worldly matters, right? And we see, well, all these other people, they got it. They didn't do it by Allah. They're doing fine. They're doing okay. Things are, maybe they had it easier than me. So there's a temptation to think that because others were able to do it without Allah's assistance, at least what we can divine, whatever we can figure out. But there's a missing ingredient in that. So for example, if you're trying to attain a certain amount of wealth and you see others that reach that level of wealth and you say, well, they got it and they don't even believe in Allah. They don't even believe in God. But the thing is, they may have received it, but it might be without any barakah. It might be without any blessings. It might be without any benefit. In fact, it might even be a curse on them. And that person is not getting tawfiq, because you might get what you want, but if you don't get it in the way that you should be before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it actually is a net negative. It's actually not really what you want. And so this process of thinking about seeking things by Allah, whether it is something which is worldly or it is something otherworldly, we have to reframe our way of thinking and seek it through Allah. Iltizam ma amar wa taraka ma haram. Right? As Ibn Ajib said, it is sticking to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to do and to abstain from the things that He has forbidden us from doing. And He has three things that He mentioned. He said, first, you have to restrict yourself to that which is permissible. Right? And this is obvious, right? If you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something or you're seeking it through Him, then it has to be something good. That's step number one. Number two is you have to take the means while placing trust in Allah. I'm not going to repeat the previous points, but for those who didn't hear the earlier sessions, it's very important. When you take the means, what is the thought process at the moment of taking the means? You take the means as if everything depends on it. So when we take means, we're not wishy-washy. Like, is studying going to help me pass the exam? Right? So when you're studying as if your result depends on your studying. So as if there's a direct causation rather, not correlation. There's a direct causation between you studying and passing your exam. But then in the moment of realizing that outcome, in the moment of performing, in the moment of taking that exam, what is your thought process? Now you have to pivot. And this is where people struggle, because they took all the preparations, they did the tadbir, right? And now it's time to execute, and they're still thinking that the outcome is caused by the preparation. So what are you thinking in your mind at the moment of taking the exam? Should you depend on the means now? You should depend on Allah as if the means had no consequence at all. So you take the means as if it's only about the means, and then you have to switch and then act as if the means had nothing to do with it. And that's the part that we struggle with. There are some Muslims who are very passive. They say, whatever Allah wills, it's going to happen. You ask them, well, are you thinking about going for promotion? Are you thinking about taking some certifications or advancing in your career? They say, well, I'm happy with where Allah has put me. No, alhamdulillah, Allah has put you there. But also, if you don't take any means, then it's impossible for you to advance in your career. Don't blame that on Allah if you're stagnant. Similarly, as I mentioned last week, there are people who haven't found a life partner, who are looking to get married. And then, we shouldn't give them a hard time, but our culture is that we do, right? We give them a hard time, right? We're always nosy, asking, well, who are you talking to, right? Where are you going? When you're getting married, the day they get married, then what's the next question the day after people get married? When are you having babies, right? That's the easiest question. Everybody knows. And then if they actually get pregnant, oh, why did you get pregnant so early? You're the one telling me that when you're having babies. And people, it's like the story of Juha, right? With the father and the son and the camel, right? You guys know the story. And people will never be happy. In the end, nobody was riding the camel, because you can't make people happy. They always have a problem with everything that you do, right? But there are people who don't go out and don't look, because they're like, well, I feel like whatever is meant to happen, it's meant to happen, right? Well, if you don't meet anyone, then of course, then it's never going to happen, right? Don't blame that on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? You have to take the means, but then the outcome is only going to happen if it is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written. That's number two. Number three is that if Allah gives you what you're seeking, then you show gratitude. But if he withholds the thing that you wanted, then submit. Then accept whichever outcome Allah has chosen for you. Be patient and be content with that. This is the hard part. Many of us will tolerate when something bad happens, or there's a musibah, there's a calamity, then we say, I'll be patient, I'll be patient. But to truly accept it and to embrace it and to be satisfied with it and to be content in your heart with that, that is a higher level. So in the phrase, just to sum what we just said, in the phase of preparation, we do everything we need to do. But then there's a moment of action. And in the moment of action, we are relying only on Allah, and we're not relying binafsik. We're not relying on ourselves. Why? Because Allah is going to give the best possible result for you, right? Even though there might be others that got more or got something better, but that's not the best outcome for you. So for example, if you see that you're in a team of 4 people, 3 get promoted and you don't, then you have to understand that, yes, maybe it could be a good thing for those 3 individuals, but maybe it was withheld from you because it would have been a bad thing for you, because now you would have worked weekends, or I don't know what. There might be something in there that you couldn't perceive at the moment, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew. I'll ask you a question. How many people knew that COVID-19 was going to happen? We're in the the wealthiest country in the world, right? The markets went crazy, government went crazy. We overcorrected in 1,000 different ways. What about what happened this week? Anybody watching the financial markets? All of the McKinseys and Bains and BCG and Accentures, how many of these consulting firms, did any of them predict that SVB is going to fail? We had 2 regional banks that failed back to back. Did anyone predict this? No one. And then what ends up happening is Moody's comes out and they downgrade all of the small banks in America. It's like, well, we don't need you now. Now you're going to come in and downgrade all the banks? You're supposed to tell us when there's a problem. They come in after everybody knows there's a problem and they downgrade all their ratings. So now they can't even get any money, right? It's like people with bad credit, they can't get a credit card. It's like, well, before when I had money, everybody wanted to give me money. But now that I actually need to use the credit, you can't. But that's how financial markets work when they're based on riba, when they're based on interest. And then what ended up happening in the 2-year yield, the T-bills, we had 150 basis point swing in a single day. Now, it doesn't matter who you read. If you read the Wall Street Journal every day, you listen to Bloomberg, it doesn't matter which expert you listen to, nobody said that was going to happen. If there's somebody who predicted this, please tell me. I don't know of a single person. So the crazy thing is, like, we have this kind of amnesia. We think that we are so in the know and we have predicted everything that's going to happen. And at the end of the day, we're just kind of in a rodeo. We're just holding on with our dear lives and we think we're in control, but we don't have control. So we don't and there's so many unknowns and so many variables in the real world that it's impossible for us to really know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has in mind. There are known unknowns and there are unknown unknowns, right? And this is why we do istikhara. This is the essence, right? Even in small matters, you can do istikhara. You don't have to do the whole formal istikhara. Even when you choose something small, that, oh Allah, astakhiruka bi'ilmik. Oh Allah, I'm seeking your direction with your superior knowledge. Wa anta allamul ghuyub, and you know all of the unseen. You know what is best. Because behind the istikhara is the idea that we are making decisions based on our perception of what's good and what's bad. But our perception is naturally limited. So only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows behind what is behind door number 4. We think that door number 4 looks great, but it could be a trap. And only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can direct us there. So trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala making that outcome happen and not the means itself. So there's a couple points here. One is the fallacy is because we are so immersed in the means, right? Then we start to go into doubtful matters. Somebody thinks like, oh, I'm going to make it really big. They start skipping important things. You know, they're so immersed in their work. They stop calling their parents. They neglect their families. They think like, oh, I need to make X happen, thinking that I am in control of whether X is going to happen or not. And they start losing out on things that are actually more important. And this is a disease of the heart because you think that those means are actually going to cause the thing that you want. The second thing is our frustration if things don't work. This is a sign that you are not doing it by Allah. If you get frustrated, if you do your best and you say, I'm satisfied that I tried my best and it didn't work out, then this is a sign you did it by Allah. But if you get so attached to a certain outcome and you're frustrated, then that's a sign that you didn't seek Allah's help. And the third sign is that if things do work out, you think you deserved it. You earned it. It was because you were the best and nobody else could have done it. Right? I mean, who uses those kind of phrases? You know, I've got the biggest, I've got the bestest. You know, it's huge, right? Nobody else can do it. I'm the only one that can do it that way. And you know, we laugh about it because obviously it shows ego. But from a spiritual perspective, beyond the ego, there's a deep disease of the heart. Because behind that ego, like I'm so important, is a person who really believes that I caused that outcome. It's almost a problem with Aqidah as the Muslims. It's a theological problem because you think that you have control over making something happen. And that is actually going to weaken and destroy your iman beyond the problem of the ego. So for example, in the Quran, Allah says, قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ اسْتَعِينُوا بِاللَّهِ وَاصْبِرُوا إِنَّ الْأَرْضَ لِلَّهِ يُورِثُهَا مَن يَشَاءُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. So Musa, he says to his people, استعينوا, seek assistance billah. Again, you see this word, billah. Seek assistance through Allah, by Allah, wasbiru, and be patient. Surely the earth Allah causes to be inherited for those whom He chooses from His servants. وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. And the end result is for the muttaqeen, for the people of taqwa. As Allah mentions again, He said, وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. In Surah At-Talaq, whoever depends on Allah, He is sufficient. Right? Inna Allah balighu amri. Allah is the one that will cause that matter to transpire. He is the one who will make it happen. So even in spiritual matters, you enter into your salah and you think, well, I'm going to be so attentive. I'm going to have khushu' in my prayer. This is going to be, you know, we come into the last 10 days, nights of Ramadan and we're like, I'm going to have X experience. We think that we are going to create that mood or that atmosphere or that experience, that I'm going to cause it through my sheer willpower. And what ends up happening? We say Allahu Akbar and all the distractions run through our mind. Why? Because even though you are praying for Allah, lillah, you were not praying billah. Because you were thinking that you are the one that's going to bring the khushu' in your salah. that you're going to be it. And it sounds like, well, you're doing a good thing. You're praying to Allah, right? And let's assume that it's completely sincere for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you still thought that you are the one that's creating that spirituality. And so it wasn't billah. It wasn't by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Abdurrahman ibn Samura, he was told by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Ya Abdurrahman ibn Samura, he said, قال لا تسأل إمارة. Do not seek to be in charge of affairs. Okay? Don't try to be the boss. This is, by the way, this is one of the hubbur ri'asa. Love of leadership is one of the worst and most dangerous diseases of the hearts. You see it in countries, you see it internationally, you see it in local areas, you see it in organizations, you see it even in the family unit. Everybody wants to be the queen and nobody wants to be the worker bee, right? Everybody wants to be, I spend, as you know, I spend a lot of time in the Middle East, and I love teasing Arabs, because living there, I've been to so almost every other Arab country. And I spent some time in the Gulf, and I always joke, I said, in the Gulf, everybody is mudir, right? So there's no one to do anything, right? Mudir means the manager. So everybody, and you go in a company and everybody has these beautiful titles, the general manager and supervisor of this. It's like, okay, well, if everyone is a manager, who are they managing? Like, there's no workers, right? And this is the problem, that everybody wants to be in charge, but actually this prevents things from happening. So the Prophet ﷺ told Abdurrahman, لا تسأل الإمارة, don't seek that out. فإن أعطيها عن مسألة وكلت إليها. So if you are given it, right? And then, well, let me give the whole thing. وإن أعطيها من غير مسألة Let's say the second part first. That if you are given authority without asking for it, then you will be assisted in that. So some people, they're given authority, but they're not like running after it. Then you'll receive assistance in it. But if you're given it after having asked, then wukilta ilayha. You will be left completely, you'll be discarded and left alone. And you'll have to take care of it yourself. وإذا حلفت عن يمين فرأيت غيرها خيرا منها فكفر عن يمينك وأتي الذي هو خير. So this is another matter, which is that if you swore an oath to do something, then you saw something else that was better, then atone for that and do what you thought was better. So do the substitution for that oath and do the thing which you thought which is better to do. So this takes us to the conclusions, inshallah, and then we'll do some adhkar. The tawfiq is the secret sauce. That enabling grace from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what we all need. We need tawfiq min Allah. Because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala graces what you do and blesses what you do, then whatever outcome that happens is good for you, is beneficial for you. This is why one of the dua that we should actually say every day, this is one that is masnoon from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. It's also in the Al-Wird al-Latif, the one that I've mentioned before, that I recommend everyone to read every day. It's mentioned in there, وَلَا تَكِلْنِي إِلَى نَفْسِي طَرْفَةَ عَيْنٍ. وَلَا تَكِلْنِي إِلَى نَفْسِي طَرْفَةَ. By the way, this dua is very dear to my heart. Because it really, when you say it, it reminds you of something. That, oh Allah, لا تكلني إلى نفسي. Do not leave me alone to my own devices. Do not leave me to myself. ولا لأحد من خلقك. In another version, or to anyone in your creation. Don't entrust me in their hands. Don't even entrust me in my own hands. I'm not responsible enough to take care of myself. طرفة عين. Even for the blink of an eye. Oh Allah, don't leave me even for the blink of an eye to my own devices. Because when we think of, well, who do we trust, right? Usually everybody says, I trust my mom, right? After that, who do you trust? Most people are like, I don't trust anybody else. Not sure about dad, right? Tell you later, right? But people, who do people trust? Most of the time, people who are very jaded, right? They just trust themselves, right? But this dua reminds you that you are actually not a good caretaker of yourself, because so many things we do that are damaging. But whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only wants good for us. And He is the one that takes care of us. And when we get sick, He's the one that heals us. And when we're broken, He is the one who makes us whole. He is Al-Jabbar. So who are you going to entrust yourself to? Of course, only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even you being in charge is a danger. So the sign of this hikmah is that you have to have some detachment towards what you're seeking. So first, when you're asking and you want something, don't feel bad for wanting something. That's not the problem. But then you have to recognize, I want X, but I'm also a little bit detached. I'm not so obsessed with X happening. Can we do that? Where we want things, but don't want it that bad, right? Don't force yourself not to want it, but also don't be so attached to that thing happening. You need a little bit of detachment. And then the third part is that your heart has to be preoccupied with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you have to master your heart, because the more that Allah takes over your heart, then the less you're going to really want that other thing. Then the other thing is just going to be, it's going to be there, but it's going to seem less important to you. As one of the scholars said, whoever seeks whatever seeking by Allah, their needs will be taken care of, inwardly or spiritually, even if Allah does not take care of it physically, right? So there are acts that we do by Allah that lead to closeness, and there are acts that we do for Allah that lead to reward. I'll say that again. There are acts that we do by Allah, and if we do it by Allah, then it makes us closer to Him. And there are acts that we do for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the one that every Muslim knows about. And these lead to mathaba. These lead to thawab. They lead to reward. But if you really want to bring everything together as a believer, in which your actions are making you rewarded by Allah, that bring you closer to Allah, that please Allah, then you have to seek it by Allah, to Allah, for Allah, and you have to do it with Allah. All of this has to coincide in order for that thing to really benefit you, not in the sense that you're just getting the thing that you want, but the act of seeking it through Allah is actually going to make the thing blessed for you, instead of you just getting the thing. Right? Which is just an expediency argument that, like, I really want that. Okay, so, oh Allah, please give it to me. But the act of coming to Allah and seeking it through Allah, then Allah will give it to you if it's best for you. And not only that, the act of you turning to Him will make you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now you have the reward and you also have the closeness that you've gained with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As you know, this is the last session before the month of Ramadan. So I just want to offer a little bit of advice to make a plan for each day in the month of Ramadan, which is realistic, which is easy for you, which is comfortable, something which you're able to do consistently for all of the days of Ramadan. Because the best, right, actions to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is adwamuha. As the Prophet said, the one which is the most constant, wa in qal. Even if it's less, qal from what? Even if it's less than what you can do on that individual day. So you might think like, oh, well, I'm reading, I read 1 juz'ah, I can read 2 juz'ah in a day. But if you do that, then it might diminish your joy. It might be a hardship for you. You might read a little bit faster. You might not be able to look things up as you read. You might not be able to contemplate the ayat. So I want to discourage you from overdoing it, but have a plan, have a game plan that this month of Ramadan, I'm going to spend 10 minutes, do my adhkar in the morning, in the evening. I'm going to recite Quran for 30 minutes. I'm going to do this and that, and incorporate it within your worldly life, because you don't want to get behind in work. You want to make sure you have enough sleep. Why? And I'll mention one last thing. When Salat al-Tarawih was established, as you know, it wasn't formally done initially. And then the Sahaba, they all agreed that this is what the Prophet did not command us to do, but this is what he wanted in his heart. Everybody with me? The Prophet did not tell us to do Salat al-Tarawih, but the Sahaba understood it, that this is something which the Prophet wished. So this was their interpretation. We're following that. Not because the Prophet ﷺ said that we should do Salatul Tarawih. He never did. And when they established that, Umar ibn Khattab, do you know what he said? He said that the people who are sleeping are better than the ones who are praying. Can you believe that? I mentioned it the other day to some of us who were chatting. Why did Umar say that the ones who are sleeping are better than the ones who are praying? Exactly. Because their intention in sleeping was to wake up to pray Salatul Tarawih, Salatul Tahajjud, Qiyamul Layl, which in the view of Umar al-Khattab was more important than praying after Isha. But of course, praying after Salatul Isha is for us because we're the masses of people. We're in the beginner's level. But for the advanced, they're going to pray in the end, in the last 1/3 of the night. And he said, those that are sleeping right now, even their sleeping is rewarded because their intention is to wake up and to pray in the end of the night. And this is a good lesson for us. That everything you do in the month of Ramadan, if you take a 1-hour nap, if you're taking the nap so you can have more energy, so you can worship in the night, your nap is going to be rewarded. If you break your fast, so that way you have more energy to fast the next day, your eating is rewarded. So if you have that intentionality, every single thing that you're going to do in the month of Ramadan is going to be something which is rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's go straight into the adhkar, and then we'll take a few minutes of some questions and discussion, inshallah. Let's begin with tasbih. Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar. Subhanallah walhamdulillah 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 والله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله. 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 والله أكبر. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that I ask Allah for forgiveness 100 times in a day. His istighfar was not for any sins, but as a means for his elevation, for him ascending in maqam before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and increasing until the day in which he returned to Al-Rafiq al-A'la. So we'll do istighfar inshallah. Astaghfirullah, 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 أستغفر الله 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 أستغفر الله. فاعلم أنه لا إله إلا الله، واستغفر لذنبك وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات، والله يعلم متقلبكم ومثواكم. لا إله إلا الله 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 حسبي ربي جل الله ما في قلبي غير الله نور محمد صلى الله لا إله إلا الله حسبي ربي جل الله ما في قلبي غير الله نور محمد صلى الله لا إله إلا الله حسبي ربي جل الله ما في قلبي غير الله نور محمد صلى الله لا إله إلا الله حسبي ربي جل الله ما في قلبي غير الله نور محمد صلى الله لا إله إلا 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 الله إلا الله إلا الله إلا الله إلا الله لا إله 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 إلا الله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Barakallah feekum. May Allah bless all of you and your families. Uh, since we have 5 or 10 minutes, we'll take some questions, inshallah, before Salat al-Isha. And we can take questions also from Zoom, if there are any. We'll be checking it. Also, if there are questions about the month of Ramadan, please join us on Tuesday. We have a very special program. The first time we're doing it, Ask the ICCP Imams. So we're used to asking Dr. Tariq all of the hard questions. Now you get to ask all three of us. So please join us.
You transfer your questions to him.
I will, of course. Any fatwa related questions, go straight to the Mufti, go to Dr. Tariq.
So my question also belongs to Israel. We refer to him. My question is that we usually go to gym for exercises, and during the month of Ramadan, and it is different genders there. So are we permissible, women, for example, I won't say about the man, to go to the gym and do the exercises in the different gender section?
So there are some who say that in the gym, people are not dressed appropriately, so don't go. I happen to not agree with that because people are dressed inappropriately everywhere. So then it means just stay in your house. But this is this is one view, one opinion. But I don't agree with that. I think the most important thing is that you yourself should be dressed appropriately when you go to the gym, right? Because and most of the people, I really do think that most nowadays with TikTok and social media, people post, I was at the gym and creepers are watching me, and there are some people like that out there. But 99% of the people who go to the gym are there to work out, right? They're not there to look at anybody. So if you dress appropriately and you go there with good intentions, then there should be no barrier to going to the gym. Most of the gyms, they close at 11 or 12 p.m. Alhamdulillah, Salat al-Taraweeh here is going to be at 9 p.m. So I would recommend people, even if they normally go in the morning while they're fasting, they can go in the evening and you won't miss out on anything, inshallah.
Thank you very much. My another question is about this 2-3 days before I came here, and there was a hot discussion between some scholars, I should say. They were talking about hijab. So here in Masjid. So my friends were also with me. So we sat with them, and one of the persons, scholar, he told, you know what, the hijab is only mandatory, compulsory for women, for wives of our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. These men, they are misleading you. That you should do the hijab, etc. So then one of my friends asked him that, tell me, she was happy because she's not in hijab all the time. So, tell me, can you tell me in which ayah is this? that only hijab is compulsory for the wives of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Then he quoted some verses. I don't know the verses, but he told it is the Surah Ahzab.
Surah Al-Ahzab on the second page. Yeah. Yeah, I know the verse.
So, because I am in hijab. So
but Ayatul Hijab is in the fourth surah of the Quran, which is Surah An-Nisa. And it came after, Surah Al-Ahzab came after that. Yeah.
So then we need not to have go for hijab. It's only for the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's wives, right?
Well, this is his opinion, but at the risk of being impolite, it's clearly wrong. You know, I rarely will say that because I respect legitimate difference of opinion. But on this matter, there's no validity to this view that the hijab is only on the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because it says it's very clear in the ayah. But there's a mistake socially and culturally on our side that we have created hijab as a marker of faith. And that is a great mistake, and that is a disservice to people who wear hijab and those who don't wear hijab, because we have elevated it as the most important thing that a Muslim woman does. So when somebody starts wearing hijab, we make a big fuss about it. And then if somebody takes off the hijab, we think they're having a crisis of faith. And there are so many people who feel trapped in their hijab because if they remove it, it becomes like a big statement. And this is not how it is intended to be. Hijab is not a piece of cloth. Hijab is a concept. The word for the cloth that a woman wears is khimar. The word hijab is not used in the Quran at all to mean a piece of cloth. Hijab means to dress appropriately and to have a veil and to dress modestly. So when we say, is hijab part of Islam? 100% hijab is for men and women. Men have to observe hijab. But it sounds weird when I say men have to observe hijab. What is Imam Refai saying? But it's clearly in the Quran, right? It's in Surah An-Nur, it's in Surah An-Nisa, and it's very clearly articulated, and also in Surah Al-Ahzab as well. So we have overemphasized it, but the argument that the Quran doesn't talk about covering the body is clearly false, because the verse says it and there's no ambiguity about it. But we have made it so important. The same with the beard. People obsess about the beard. If it was so important, there would be an ayah, ayatul lihya, the ayah of the beard. Where's ayatul lihya? There's no verse on the beard. The Prophet ﷺ, he would say, you know, Ya qawm, oh my people, have a beard. Did you find any khutbah from the Prophet ﷺ about having a beard? No, because we made it important. But is it part of the religion? Yeah, all of this is part of the religion. But being good to your neighbor, respecting your parents, you know, silatul rahim, respecting, these things are much more important than hijab. But people, then you find people on extremes. Some people, they make hijab to be the most important thing, and then people on the other side, they said, oh, the hijab is not compulsory. No, I mean, the truth is, of course, it's in the middle.
But we have seen people who are without hijab, they have stronger faith than the others who are wearing the hijab. We see the persons, they do morally, they are so bad, those who are in hijab. Sometimes, it's not all the time.
Well, if they took off the hijab, then you really find out what, maybe they're worse.
Then you say, oh, she's in hijab. Let me not go for the hijab. See what is her character.
Right. You know, at the end of the day, the person is the person. Whether their clothes are not, you know, if you put on a hijab, if, you know, it's like you cannot put lipstick on a pig, right? It's still going to be, you know, so if the person is good, then the person will be good with or without hijab.
That's
and
true.
If the person has bad, and they'll be bad with or without the hijab. The hijab does not tell you anything about the religiosity and the faith of that person.
Yeah, that's
not good and not bad.
Thank you very much.
But is hijab something which is pleasing to Allah? It is something pleasing to Allah, and all of the other things are also pleasing to Allah. We have to stay away from extreme positions. You know, our religion is very simple and very clear, and it's not confusing at all. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. There's also a question here. Wa alaikum assalam. What is the recommendation for someone who's pregnant during the month of Ramadan? This is a beautiful question. And inshallah, we're going to discuss this more on Tuesday, because the whole community should know. With regard to fasting, the common belief among all Muslims is that fasting is automatically that a pregnant woman does not fast, but this is not true. A pregnant woman should make the decision based on her condition, whether she wants to fast or not fast. So if you're pregnant, let's say you're in the second trimester, you don't have morning sickness, you don't want to have to make up your fast later because you might be nursing and then you're going to accumulate more. You don't want to miss out on the month of Ramadan. Go ahead and fast. There's no such thing that pregnancy automatically, stops you from fasting. But if medically there is a hardship on your body, then you are, of course, فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ, then make it up in other days. There's a second miscommunication. People think that they can give in fidya, in donation, for someone who is temporarily sick, right? So pregnancy falls in that category. You are not able to give money. Why? Because the pregnancy is going to end, right? And so when the pregnancy ends, inshallah, your health is restored, you'll be able to make up those fasts. So all you have to do is, and there are people, sometimes they're pregnant, then they have another pregnancy, then they have nursing. Some people go 4 or 5 years without fasting in the month of Ramadan, and it's totally fine. And then later they make up فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ. Then they make up those days later on. Okay. If there's one last question, we can take it, inshallah. We'll take a last question if there's any. Yes. Sure. Yeah.
You explained that hijab is dressed appropriately.
Yes.
And how come now hijab becomes the hijab that we know about?
It's a word, we're using the word wrong. So many things. For example, we use the word sunnah wrong. I'm not upset about it. So for example, we say, oh, this action is sunnah. This is a sunnah prayer. There's no, if you open the books of fiqh, we don't have such a word. Right? Sunnah means the hadith of the Prophet. That is the sunnah. That is the accurate word, sunnah. But when we say this is a sunnah, that's a sunnah, and I use it too, but we're using it as a slang term. This is not the accurate word. So similarly, when we say, oh, can you get me a hijab from the closet? I'm not telling you don't use the word hijab. You can use the word hijab. But when you read the word hijab in the Quran, you better be aware that it doesn't mean the way that we're using it. It had a different meaning at that time. That hijab was a concept of modesty. It was the word for the cloth that a woman wears on her head is called فَضْرِبُوهُنَّ بِخُمُرِهِنَّ. So the word is khimar. There was no such, in the time of Prophet, there was no such piece of cloth called hijab. So you're not going to find it in hadith, you're not going to find it in the Quran, you're not going to find it in tafsir, you're not going to find the word hijab anywhere. Right? You're only going to find it in the modern slang, which we use, which is totally fine. But the problem with that is when you go back to the Quran, just be aware that you have to understand the Quran the way that they understood it. For example, Aisha radiallahu anha, when Ayat al-Hijab came down, even I call it Ayat al-Hijab, which is wrong, right? She said that the ladies of the Ansar, and she praised them, that when the ayah came down, they took their curtains and they used the cloth from the curtains in order to stitch abayat and khimar because they wanted to cover themselves. So this is how the Aisha and the Sahabiyat from the Ansar, this is how they understood the ayah. That they were not thinking, what is the minimum? What is the maximum? They were saying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to dress nicely, modestly, appropriately, respectfully. So they were not asking nobody asked the Prophet how many feet, how many inches. We're the one asking which color, can it be black, can it be yellow? No, what's the problem? We'll dress any color you like, but just dress nicely and appropriately. And we made it such a complicated matter, whereas it should be very simple. If we really pay attention to what the Quran says and the Sunnah says, then it won't be an issue, inshallah.
Just a follow-up.
Well, yeah.
So having a beard or covering the hair is the same thing?
No. These are two different topics.
Is there in the Quran saying that cover your head?
The beard falls in a different category because observing the beard is contrary to what people think. It's not to identify as a Muslim. It's primarily in observing the example of the Prophet ﷺ. Whereas the hijab is something which both men and women have to do, but the requirements for women are more. Why? Because the bodies of women are different from لَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنْثَى. And so because of that, but it is equally important for men and for women to both dress appropriately and to act appropriately, have the proper adab, the proper etiquettes in their interactions. And so this is the issue of haya is more important than having a beard, right? But the beard only pertains to men. I believe that that observing hijab in society is the duty of men and women. So, for example, a lot of Muslim majority countries, if a woman is wearing jeans or pants and walking in the street, what happens? You know what comments and cat calls they will face. Is this what we expect in a so we expect the women to dress appropriately, but the men can behave like that? I mean, this is a real issue that we have to really confront, that we're talking about a Muslim society and then this is how our young men are behaving. So, we have a lot of work to do. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq and facilitate us. And anything which we do with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He makes kulli dhiqin makhraja, He makes an opening for everything. Baligh amri, He makes everything possible, right? فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ, He is sufficient for all of us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the best of Ramadan. Allahumma balighna Ramadan. Allow us to reach the month of Ramadan and to benefit from all of what the month of Ramadan offers. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I look forward to seeing all of you on Tuesday evening for the Ask the ICCP Imams, and then on Wednesday night at 9 p.m. inshallah for the first Salat al-Tarawih. May Allah accept minna wa minkum. Barakallahu feekum.